Trust me. I've been at parties where they were like, "Oh, you playing in the snow?" And I was like, "Well, you know what? I don't want to play in the mud. I want to get dirty now." She goes,
DJ.
My boy was sitting there, he goes, "Motherfucker, brave dog. You brave. You about to get." I know. I was like, she came at me first. So, it is what it is.
So I guess the question would be,
Yep.
do you believe it is okay for a black man to marry a white woman?
Absolutely, 1,000%. I think you marry whoever you want, right? Like if a white woman wants to marry a black man, perfect. If a black man wants to marry a Chinese woman, perfect. It is what it is. I mean, as long as everybody's happy and you're not committing any crimes and you're not beating each other, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah,
For me, I got a lot of that, not growing up, but I've always dated white girls.
Okay.
My whole entire life.
Now, look, I wouldn't have said it like that because saying playing in the mud is usually associated with being dirty. That's why it's going to be a little bit more controversial by saying playing in the mud versus saying playing in the snow. It's because mud is seen as something that's dirty. So I can understand why people may be offended by what he said, but you got to hear what he's actually saying. And before I even give my little take on what he's already said, I just want to go ahead and start this by saying I do not care if you call me a raccoon down in the comments. Any African-American person who's well-spoken, who cares about their education, and who critiques black culture, African-American culture, we already know what the comments going to look like. I have a black woman. Our daughter is black. There's a black angel right next to her bassinet. You come in my house, you're going to see pictures of black families. My grandmother's name was Paulette, so you know that's a black-ass name. I am get your butt in the house before the street lights come on black. I am foot racing in the middle of the street black. Come up, Nay. I am in church every Sunday without the AC, just the hand fan black. I am, since we don't know who did it, everybody get a whooping black. And I'm only starting it off that way, not because I care about what the comments are going to say, but just because I want to show you how predictable it is. Any black man that critiques African-American culture is always called the raccoon word. We get it. But with that being said, I understand where you're coming from. Now, again, I wouldn't have said playing in the mud as a reference to African-American women, but I understand what he's saying. And I was having a conversation with one of my buddies recently about this. And I told him, bro, like if you raised your African-American child to be loving, if he go and visit his siblings on the other side of town, he's going to get bullied for being loving in our community. So even from the beginning stages, when you getting raised, you kind of have to have an edge, and that's just to protect yourself from bullying. And to be honest, it carries over into adulthood. There are a lot of African-American men that are a little bit more conservative, a little bit more traditional. They might be a little bit more well-spoken even, or a little bit more scholarly. And they are looking for African-American women, but when they look for African-American women, they're always called lame or boring. And that's always the label until they get some level of success. But by then, they already, like he said, dating a white woman. When you an African-American man and you growing up and you talking to African-American women, you damn near have to have an edge. And it's even reflected in our art. Like people like Childish Gambino and Will Smith. Will Smith got married to Jada, but that was a little bit later. At first, he wanted to date a black woman, like he said, but nobody would accept him, and that's because he wasn't successful yet. You got to see him as a theater kid. He was a theater kid, and in our community, that would be considered lame or boring or wanting to be white or whatever it may be. Even in the shows, they didn't say it outright, but it was kind of implied that Steve Urkel was a lame. Why? Because he cared about his education. Even somebody like Carlton, it was implied that he was a lame. Why? Because he cared about self-discipline, being well-spoken, and having a decent education. But again, it's implied in our culture where if you're well-spoken, if you're a little bit more scholarly, if you have some more traditional values, you're seen to be a lame or boring. So I get what he's saying. The dude is like 5'4", he's like 120 pounds soaking wet, and he's well-spoken. So I understand why in our community he might not get any looks, especially until he was successful.
No.
Yes.
He's a milkman.
He's a milkman.
I'm going to use that one. You called me the milkman, huh? I respect that. I've dated black girls before. It didn't work out. They were trying to bully me all the time. I was like, I don't want them problems. I'm good.
Getting bullied.
So I wanted to keep on walking door to door and delivering milk. All right. But for me, it's always weird because depending on where I'm at in the country, right? If I'm over in the East Coast, if I'm like in Maryland, all that stuff, that's where I can feel the tension. I can feel like, of course. You can't handle a strong woman.
Yeah,
I was like, you might be right because I might be doing a lot more than I'm begging for. Yeah, and it's like I said, it's something I dealt with my whole entire life. Being in a barbecue full of homies and everybody there's black and they're all dating black chicks and I'm not. And I'm like,
now you that guy.
That's your guy's problem. I was like, who? I ain't gonna say it, but I was like, who's all stressed out here? Not my black ass. You all are.
This man is wild.
Nah, but I see what he's saying. At some point in our community, we started to worship the people that was a part of the problem. And that was the biggest issue with the African-American community. We started to worshiping the people that was a part of the problem and saying that those were the good guys, and none of those guys had any virtues. But when you look back in the past, because I'm from the hood, bro, and just because you're from the hood don't mean you got to be ghetto. And that's something that my grandmother taught me. Just because you're from the hood don't mean you can't be articulate. Don't mean you can't be well-spoken. And when you look at a lot of our leaders from the past, the people who actually had motion and had political influence from the African-American community, a lot of those people were well-spoken. They were articulate. They were smart. They read a lot of books. They were educated. And they were worshipped for those traits. But in this modern African-American culture, for some reason, if you follow that same lineage, all of a sudden you want to be white, which is weird. Not being able to speak proper English don't mean that you black. It means that you stupid. That's what I was taught. And as an African-American man, when you try to date African-American women, you almost are forced to have some type of edge. Now, there are African-American women that will date white dudes, but when they date white dudes, they don't require them to have that same level of edge. And if you a black man, you gonna understand what I'm saying. For a black man, you damn near have to have some level of edge in order to get any play in our community. And I think that's a problem. I know dudes that are well-spoken, well put together, and make over 6 figures, but every time they try to date within the black community, they always getting their masculinity challenged. And no man wants to be in a place where he's not wanted and his masculinity is always challenged. Especially a man that respects his peace and actually wants to grow in the world. And by the way, this is something that I have noticed as prominent in the African-American culture, but I see this type of attitude growing amongst the women in almost every culture, especially in Western civilization. It'd be a black dude who's kind of loving, a little bit more lighthearted, but when he try to date black women, he's boring or he's lame until he meets some level of success or until she gets to a certain age where she's ready to settle down. And I don't care what community you're a part of, no man wants to be second fiddle. Again, this is something that's just prominent in modern black culture. This isn't something that happened in the past. In the past, we had well-spoken black articulate men who could lead politically, and these guys were married at higher rates than any other demographic in America. So this isn't something that we've been doing previously, but this is definitely something that's been happening within the past 20, 30, 40 years, I'd say. When you talk to DJs, they'll tell you straight up that they play the music that the ladies want to hear. And when you listen to the music that they play and you listen to the people and you pay attention to the people that we tend to put to the forefront, of course, Taylor Swift is bad. I don't think she's good in terms of her influence on some of the ladies in other communities. But have you ever heard of Sexy Red? Everything is about taking advantage of men. Everything is about what you can get from a man, and everything is overly promiscuous. And that type of mindset is implemented in the culture. They try to act like it's a good thing to be a problem. Like, there are African-American women, there are black women that'll say you can't handle a woman. Who wants to handle a woman? We supposed to be coexisting together. We supposed to be on the same team. Why I gotta handle you? You're not a wild animal. So yeah, DJ is light-skinned, he's 5'3", and he's about 130 pounds. Now, I'm not gonna fight him about it. So yeah, I understand what he's saying. Highest rate of teen pregnancy, highest rate of single motherhood. About 70% of African-American kids are born out of wedlock. Highest rates of obesity, and highest rates of divorce. And again, this wasn't a thing of the past, but this is something that's going on modernly. And I can understand DJ's take. I understand where you're coming from. After being taken advantage of and taking an outside look at the culture, some people just don't want to deal with it.